I would like to I think what I want to do is talk a little bit about what we're doing around bringing, working with delegates to achieve something sensible out of special session in 2019. I thought I'd talk a little bit about what Judicial Council just did, so you can kind of get a blow-by-blow. I'm going to assume folks kind of know the plans. I'm not going to go through the plans. I can if that's helpful, but I'm going to kind of assume a broad understanding of the plans. So let me say two things. First of all, I'm on the board for United Methodist, which is kind of the centrist group, meant to kind of enable centrists to be full participants in the debate at special session. I'm in charge of the legislative strategy group, but I'm not here to talk about that strategy. I'm just going to talk for myself, so please don't think I'm representing. I'd like the latitude to speak for myself and not for that group, if you allow it. I also need to say I don't respond well to trolling. So I know if you choose to do social media and all of this, please be very gentle. Don't bait the trolls. I don't really respond well to that. So that would just be a moment of grace if you could do that. That would be great. Hi, you at home. Nice to have you aboard. So let's see. I'm going to tell you, I guess I'm going to tell you a story from my first general conference that I attended. There was a guy named Bill Hybels, I think, is this right? Who at a Good News breakfast announced before God and humanity that it's time for the United Methodist Church to break apart. And that there was this momentum to break the church apart. And by some crazy act of serendipity, I was on the agenda committee for that particular day and put forward this idea that we would do a unity statement, right? The idea then was that the bishops would say to the church, we want unity, don't worry about it. It felt to me like only the General Conference could speak for the denomination, and a bishop's statement, as worthy as that would be, we're all there. Why not talk? So quickly, we organized a group of people to put forward a unity statement, and it passed glowingly at General Conference. It feels a little bit like we're back there again, right? So one of the petitions that is coming to General Conference, I've seen reports about. I don't have the petition, so I can't verify that it's there. But there is a dissolution petition made by Keith Boyette, leader of the WCA, which says we should have a constitutional Congress to dissolve the United Methodist Church and to figure out how to do it. So for me, I think my approach to this work is that this is really, it's not about how one reads the Bible. It's not, although LGBTQ people get hurt by it, I think what we're really talking about is the nature of church. What does it mean to be a church with people? What is the nature of being church in the modern world? Is it uniformity of opinion, or is it unity in pursuit of finding Jesus and bringing transformation to the world? And I think that's how we in United Methodists are trying to talk about what sets before us. What is going to be the nature of the church, of the United Methodist Church going forward? Is it Catholic and one view, and that's the only view? Or is it allowing a plurality of views, of people joining together in mission in an abundance of diversity and in an abundance of perspective and an abundance of different life experiences? So I'm just going to start with Judicial Council, what Judicial Council did on Friday, just to kind of bring us all to the same place. And I took, one of the key things I took from the decision, which I think is more theological and on target for me, is this quote from the decision. A primary principle in any organizational structure of the United Methodist Church, as a primary principle in any organizational structure of the United Methodist Church, connectionalism denotes a vital web of interactive relationships, multi-leveled, global in scope, local in thrust, that permits contextualization and differentiation on account of geographical, social, and cultural variations, and makes room for diversity of beliefs and theological perspectives, but does not require uniformity of moral ethical standards regarding ordination, marriage, and human sexuality. And I think this is, a very important quote and a very important statement from Judicial Council, that being a connectional church doesn't mean that the top of the connection forces decisions on all the rest. That being a connectional church means we have interrelationships, and it is those interrelationships, as diverse and multifaceted as those might be, that we find divinity together. So that's just a matter of approach. So what happened at Judicial Council? Just a couple things I like to highlight. So the One Church Plan, 1CP, OCP, it survived pretty well from Judicial Council. There were 3 planks that were stricken from the One Church Plan. None of them were central to the whole operation. So one plank that was stricken was that a bishop can choose the non-binding advice of the annual conference in regards to human sexuality. So currently in the One Church Plan, the clergy session decides who is ordained and who's not ordained in that section. The clergy session could make a policy statement, but they don't have to make a policy statement. That is all still in place. There was this other plank that said laity in the annual conference session could send a message, a non-binding resolution, to the Board of Ordained Ministry about their preferences around inclusion. Judicial Council struck that, mostly because of the bishop's role, that the bishop can't require or request legislation from the annual conference. So the way I read it, and I'm meeting with some lawyers later today to figure this out, it's possible that those non-binding things can happen, it's just that a bishop can't request them. That's how I read it. The other thing that was stricken was that, as I mentioned, clergy sessions can vote a policy, but they don't have to vote a policy. But if they do vote a policy, they can only vote once every 30 months. So Judicial Council struck the 30-month thing. It says you can't really set those kind of timings. So the fact that a clergy session can set a policy is unchanged. That's still constitutional, but they could do it every month if they wanted to. It's not like they have to wait 30 months. And the final thing that got changed was this one, which said if a clergy person's in an appointment where they are not in alignment with their local church around inclusion, they shall be reassigned. The Judicial Council says you can't tell bishops to reassign or not reassign people, right? But bishops have been very vocal about saying, we want appointments that work. We're going to try to align pastors with congregations where that's going to be successful. So that part about matching conscience stands. It's really about this disciplinary requirement that a reassignment has to happen that got knocked, right? All right, so that's it on One Church Plan. That's the only changes. Anybody want to? Please interrupt me. I don't really know what I'm saying. So if you've been in the last hour, you know it really helps me when there's some engagement. So do feel like you can jump in. Yes?
I just wanted to add, this was a unanimous decision.
Unanimous decision, yeah.
So I think that felt different to me with the first statement you made and looking at what the changes that were made, that they made a point of saying it was unanimous.
Yeah.
All 3 of them were unanimous?
The decision.
There was one decision that involved all plans.
Okay. Oh, okay.
There it is. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Excellent point. Yes, sir.
I've been saying for a long time that the inherent tension is contextualized theology within the connectional polity, and that is not going to go away. And I think that this is the gorilla in the room, but the elephant in the room is United Methodist on the continent of Africa. So I think that once we think we've dealt with this issue, the larger issue is race, the way it's dealt with globally and nationally. So I think that that's just a case study in how we can deal with this, but we're still going to be stuck with the fundamental issue of contextualized theology within a connectional polity. And until we learn how to struggle with that, other issues are going to pop up. So
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I do think 2020 is going to be this globalism is going to be a big topic, because there's the global discipline that will be discussed. There'll be U.S. as a central conference type solutions that will be presented. I do think 2020, assuming we get past, assuming things don't blow up in February, 2020 is going to be the global relationship, unpacking colonialism, contextual ministries, all of that. Yes, sir.
So Barry's my best friend, so we talk about this often debate. He's usually wrong, but I will let him. No, that's right. The contextualization that I find very fascinating here is that that very statement right there around contextualization, the previous one as well, that they put up, sort of a statement about diversity of beliefs called on self-contextualization differentiation. All of a sudden, in the past number of years, this has become a salient reality. All of a sudden, we all talk about contextualization, whereas in the past, it's always been a part of the discipline that says that's what central conferences do. And so the shift for me here is brought home by this particular presenting issue of sexuality is that we are now being confronted with the reality that we all contextualize and should, and we can do it poorly and do it well, but it's not the province of just one particular region of the world, and the U.S. is exempt from it. I think this is part of what's happening, and I think that's a welcome movement. What that means for connectionalism, of course, is a large debate, but my deepest worry about the way we throw about contextualization and differentiation right now is that because this language pops up in the context of deep division and fight, we're putting it to use in service of, we're substituting affinity for unity. We contextualize around a set of affinities on particular views on sexuality and think that's contextualizing. Whereas, to my mind, contextualization touches a much deeper set of theological concerns about how God is with us in Jesus Christ. But that's for another minute. I just want to say, I think, I listened to this, I think it's a welcome statement, but I think it needs a significant amount of work yet for us as a church to live into this. The changes we see in terms of structure, whatever these plans may bring, in some ways are connected with this. But I worry that they are put to uses here that unfortunately mask some deeper meanings of contextualization.
Yeah, I think that's right on. I guess what I'm taking from what you're saying, sometimes contextualism is a way of avoidance, right? So you avoid conflict by just saying contextualize it. But I do think the church is contextualized in more than sexuality. I mean, the ordinations processes throughout the globe are quite different. The requirement for seminary is very different across the connection. Marriage practices currently are, there are places where you can't, a dowry has to be paid before a United Methodist pastor will do a marriage. So the multiplicity of definitions and the contextual experience, I think, is more than we acknowledge, right?
Well, and four people stuck on an elevator between floors is not community, and neither is a context. It's proximity. And the point I would make is that proximity does not necessarily create either community or context. Because you're going to have proximity with a variety of people who disagree quite strongly on a variety of issues. And so I think that, I think you're right that this is really about what is the church.
What is the church?
Is the ecclesiology.
All right, so just come back to judicial council for a second. There, as you know, is the connectional conference plan. They made no opinion about the connectional conference plan, so it stands as is. What they said was the connectional conference plan has constitutional amendments in it. So how can we rule something unconstitutional when the constitutional changes might rectify it? I think it was a cop-out, but that's, except to thank you for doing that. If it were just us in the room, I'd say something about cop-outs. But, anyway, so that's set aside. So then they looked at the traditional plan. And here's the parts of the traditional plan that were stricken for lack of constitutionality. One is there was this involved accountability structure within the Council of Bishops. There was kind of an investigative committee, and you could make a complaint within the Council of Bishops. And the council of bishops would investigate, and the council of bishops would try other bishops for not following the rules, stricken as unconstitutional because you can't be the prosecutor and the jury. And so that's where that got hung up. There's this certification regime. So you may remember in the traditional plan, a board of ordained ministry. To be on the board of ordained ministry, you have to certify that you will uphold discipline around LGBTQ exclusion. That the bishop would have to certify that only people who will uphold the exclusion were nominated to the board of ordained ministry. The annual conference would have to certify that, yes, in fact, the bishop did only nominate people who did exclusion. And the Board of Ordained Ministry had to certify that they did inspect the social media of every candidate to prove that they, in fact, are not LGBTQ, right? So that regime, unconstitutional. Unconstitutional, though, because it was too narrow on LGBTQ issues. And presumably, and again, I don't know if this is the case, but if all of that was changed to say you have to certify that you will uphold all of discipline, it may have constitutional muster. So there's this chance that part of the traditional plan, which was ruled out, might get a fix, and then we're back to boards of ordained ministries having to certify that they ask questions about people's sexuality. And if they don't, there'd be consequences with GCFA. The other thing that was in the traditional plan was if those certifications didn't happen, GCFA can expel the conference, and the conference would have to go start their own church. And you have 2 years when you don't certify to be expelled and find legs for yourself. Unconstitutional. So that annual conference expulsion trigger is gone. Thank Jesus. Also, there was in the traditional plan that bishops had to vow to follow up on all sexuality claims, and that they would not allow gay clergy in the connection. That is unconstitutional because you have to hold up the whole discipline, not just that one particular paragraph. There was language about encouraging clergy who don't like, clergy who want inclusion or are allies. There was language about encouraging them to leave. That got stricken. And if you do so if there's a complaint against a clergy person, you can sometimes do a just resolution. And if you did a just resolution, the traditional plan said you had to, in the just resolution, vow that you would not repeat the offense. And that was unconstitutional. Judicial Council pointed out that sometimes just resolutions are just two people not getting along and there's no offense there to really confess to. So those are the parts that got dumped.
Bullets 3 and 4, they were both unconstitutional, again, because of the narrowness. If the language was changed to uphold the discipline, you said the trigger was gone for the annual conference, but if they change it to be for any disciplinary matter, can the whole conference still be, can there be a change in that way?
Yeah, the way I read the language, the reason it was ruled unconstitutional was that it was too narrow.
So
presumably if it said annual conferences who don't hold the whole discipline can be kicked out. Presumably that's the case, but that no annual conference means that.
If you do say all of the biblical discipline, does that include the social principles?
Right?
And like, are we going to be asking people about all of the social justice things of the social principles?
Global warming?
Yeah.
Did you preach against the death penalty?
Yeah.
Have you done something and you've gone green?
I guess, is that what that would be if you were to uphold all of the biblical discipline? Does that include the social principles?
In my view, it would.
They're part of the discipline.
I mean,
They're in the discipline.
161G is social principles,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah, I would think so. But I think some people might say, if you're the cop will arrest some things and not other things, right? There's a little bit of if certain people are in control, then it would be uneven the way that is true, right? As a person who lives in Chicago, I would say. This is dangerous. I don't know about this. Okay, so what about the traditional plan did not get found unconstitutional? And I think the press has been traditional plan unconstitutional or relief. And the heart of the connection of the traditional plan, which was this 2801 paragraph about kicking people out, and people being able to go, got stricken. But a lot of traditional plan is still there. So currently, an LGBT clergy person can, if a LGBT clergy person does a self-avow at a clergy session or to a bishop, that's the only avow that matters. They would change the definition to self-avow to be any public statement. So if you have an Instagram, if a woman and her wife had an Instagram photo, that's self-avow and can be brought up on charges, right? That was allowed to continue in the traditional plan. So currently, if a jurisdiction elects someone a bishop, I'm a little confused right now. So if the clergy person elects a bishop in the Karen Oliveto election, the bishops of the Western jurisdiction said, we have no power to not commission Karen, right? The bishops have no authority to not commission somebody elected by the jurisdiction. That's how that happened. Traditional plan says now bishops cannot consecrate a bishop, even if elected, if it's a gay bishop. And that passed constitutional muster.
The traditional plan, from what I've been told, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the only one with the gracious exit plan. Was that upheld?
Was there only one with a what?
Gracious exit.
Gracious exit plan.
First of all, it's just such a misnomer, right?
Yeah, I realize that, but
Okay, so, I wonder if did I not put that in here? So let's see. There was 3 ways to exit. The first way we talked about, which was an annual conference doesn't do the certifications and is expelled, not constitutional because it's too narrow. The second way to exit was any 50 churches could start a new denomination, and just by the act of doing that, must be allowed to leave with their buildings at no cost, right? That I'm going to get to was ruled unconstitutional as written, but the Judicial Council told them how to write it. And I'll get to that in a minute. And then the third way to, in the exit, what do they call gracious exit?
Yeah.
Exit paragraph was an annual conference can vote to leave. And that was ruled constitutional. So the traditional plan puts forward a brand new power for annual conferences. That an annual conference can say we want to leave the denomination. Apparently a majority vote's all it takes, and out you go, right? And they said that was constitutional. I just kind of want to point out, though, Westpath did an analysis of what it cost a clergy person, right? So if the annual conference votes to leave, the pension is frozen and sequestered, and that means that a lot of pension benefits to the clergy persons would be stopped, right, or capped at current rates. So I've seen a Westpath analysis that for a 50-year-old clergy person, that would cost them $200,000, right? So I don't think an annual conference, realizing that every clergy person in a conference is going to lose 6 figures of income by voting themselves out, I don't see any annual conference doing it. If they're in the pension system. Now, if you're a central conference annual conference, that might be different. Yes?
What would happen with buildings in that case?
In the annual conference, if the annual conference leaves, the buildings go with the annual conferences in the churches.
so there's no individual church, there was no plan for an individual church in the traditional model.
No, there wasn't. None of these did, which is very interesting. So in the traditionalist model that I'm sure this is right, only if you join the new denomination, right, do you get to go with a local church decision. Can you think of any denomination that might want to start? Yeah.
No,
All right, let's see. So also allowed to stand is that bishops cannot commission or ordain LGBTQ clergy. even if they pass Board of Ordained Ministry and Clergy session, that's allowed to stand. The annual conference vote to leave I told you about. And this is a new one too, that if someone is gay and lesbian, the bishop has to say you're ineligible for candidacy, right? I don't think that's a power that's ever been there, that a bishop can rule somebody ineligible for candidacy. Usually it's been trusted the Board of Ordained Ministry in the clergy session. But the traditionalist plan now is allowed to continue with this. Bishops must rule LGBT clergy candidates ineligible.
Lonnie, sorry, can I say something quickly about the previous slide? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What about, an annual conference leaving with all the properties and everything? How did the judicial council treat the trust laws in that case? I mean, it's,
Local churches have a trust clause to the benefit of the annual conference.
Gotcha.
Well, that has never held up in court when it's been dutifully litigated from Richard Allen and the AME, Pennsylvania Supreme Court onward. You know, when it's a group of Methodists who want to leave, they typically are allowed to leave their property. Individual congregations is a different matter. I mean, there's a whole history of case law.
Just question on bullets 2 and 3. At lots of points in the discipline, there is conversation about may not versus shall not, or may versus shall. So these are may nots, not shall nots.
This is traditionalist plan, so these are petitions, proposals. You should assume that it's the most severe outcome of every range you can imagine.
Okay.
Yes.
There's one other judicial council decision that was made several years ago, and it was made in Virginia when Charlene Kramer,
Yep.
you know the one I'm talking about, where the pastor refused to take into membership someone.
Keith Boyette.
Yeah,
2005.
yeah, 2005. And that to me really undermined the whole idea of baptism, confession, and admission, because it came down to the pastor may, not the pastor shall. And so that one word has made a huge difference in the way that judicial council has made rulings on this. You know, they overruled Bishop Kramer's Episcopal ruling, who overruled the pastor, and so the judicial council supported the pastor, all because of that one word.
More things that are still in the traditionalist plan. Fortify yourself. All right, here we go. Minimum penalties for same-gender weddings. So the traditional plan retains the minimum penalty that on your first time a clergy person officiates at a same-gender wedding, 1 year suspension without pay. Second time they participate in the same-gender wedding, they are what's it called?
Defraud.
Defraud? Is that the term? Defraud, right? They are without fraud. That's allowed to stand. Another thing that's allowed to stand is sometimes when a bishop gets a complaint, they just dismiss it for whatever reasons. They don't need a reason. This says a new ad would be that complaints can only be dismissed when there's no basis in law or fact. So a bishop can't just kind of take care of someone and dismiss a complaint against them. They have to have a reason in law or fact to not dismiss someone. The third one is that when there is a just resolution, which is a way to kind of resolve conflict before it goes to trial, the person who made the complaint has to agree with that just resolution. So sometimes with some folks, there is no agreement, and so you kind of get locked in, and then because there's a timeline on this, now you're in trials, where you could avoid trials. And the church has expanded powers to appeal trial decisions. All of that is allowed to stand in the traditionalist plan. So it's really severe and focused on right. It's going to be a lot of trials, all right, and then here's to Patrick's exit question. So what? As I mentioned, there are 3 ways for the church to unravel. the annual conference driven out, annual conference can choose to leave, and then the 50 church thing, they said the 50 churches wanting to go just because they wanted to start a WCA or something, or a new denomination, let's call it that. That's stricken, but that a church could exit the denomination, and here's how they have to do it. So that it would require 2/3 vote of those present and voting in each of the charge conference, of congregational meeting, the annual conference that they're a member of, and the annual conference that they're going to, right? So pretty tall standard. But rather than just ruling it on the Constitution, they said this is the standard that it needs to be for a local church to exit. And that if a local church does the charge conference in a congregational setting, the annual conference has to vote at the very next session. And that's effective immediately upon the last vote. So if the annual conference vote is last, then as soon as that passes, there it goes. Yes?
Just to clarify, is this still for the traditional plan or is this for any plan?
This is in the traditional plan. Well, so the traditional plan said a church could vote with a 55%, so that's out. Somebody would have to amend the traditional plan to put this back in order for it to be in the traditional plan. So I guess it's not in the traditional plan until somebody adds it. Or it could be added to any plan, frankly. You could add this to the one church plan if you wanted to. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes,
I'm
thank
kind
you.
of confused as to why this is even in the traditional plan, because why would a church go from one annual conference to another if they're all guided by the same general conference that is, or the book of discipline that is now so strict?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question for me. And again, I'm talking to lawyers later, so I'm going to try to understand it better. Here's my understanding right now. What they did was they quoted discipline here. So discipline says a local church can move from one annual conference to another annual conference. And what they basically said is that framework would also be used for an annual conference, for a local church to leave an annual conference and go to another denomination. Right? So I do feel it kind of stretches it a little bit. That's what we found. Yes?
Something that I had heard or read somewhere was suggesting that the traditionalists put it in their plan as a gracious thing with the hope of then adding that to the other plans. So that if the one church plan was approved, they would be able to leave with all their property. Because if that exit part got put in the other one, they could leave. But that's, people speculate.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris. I like your style. All right, here's how general conference is going to go. First day is prayer day. So there'll be a day of prayer. The second day of general conference begins with a commission on the way forward report. And then the second half of the day is what I call pick a plan day. And so the general conference is going to debate, and I don't know how this is going to happen. I presume it's going to have some small group kind of conversations that are cross connections. We aren't voting on petitions. We're just going to say which of these plans is the one you want to work on. This, from my view, is a terrific outcome in the process. We were worried that we were going to get a list of 99 petitions, some of them with this plan, some of them with that plan, in order of where they appear in the discipline, which means we have to win every 17 votes in order to get a coherent plan together. So I like that we're going to talk about the value of the plans. And at the end of the first day, we're going to say, one church plan is the one that's most interesting, or traditionalist, or connectional conference, or the simple, or the dissolution, right? We're going to just talk about these plans and highlight one of them that we will work on the next day. Very important we win that day, right? Very, very important that we win that day. So that means we need to walk in to the special session with deep relationships with 433 persons. I found it emotional all of a sudden. Deep relationships with 433 persons willing to say, for us, one church plan is the only one to talk about, right? I don't know what happens to the ones that are put aside. I presume they're done for a while. But the next day what happens is a legislative section.
Can I,
Yes.
sorry. If the one church plan is not the one that gets picked at the end of that day,
Yeah.
that's also the moment, pardon my French, where the shit hits the fan.
Yep.
What might that look like?
Well, I've only heard about that.
So if after the first day, the plan that isn't picked isn't one church,
Right.
what will that look like is a question. Okay, so a word of hope for you. Okay, my view is the way they've structured this, we all get 2 bites at the apple. There are 3 days of debate. We just need to win 2 of them. One of them needs to be the last day, but we can win one of the other 2 and we'll be okay, right? So if we don't get the pick a plan day, what we need to do is pull it, we're behind in the first half. We've got to make up some ground in the second half, right? But even as you begin to imagine it, what could happen after pick a plan day, it's why I say we need to know 433 yes votes before we get to special session, right? And that those people are in relationship with us so that we can manage through any parliamentary chicanery or trickery, right? And we can bust through and stay above water.
And that's part of why I asked that, is if there are folks who walk away after pick a plan part 1, who are then not at the table to come back to the table when it comes up again. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's important for folks to know, like, if pick a plan part 1 does not go the way they hope it to, that's not the end all be all, and it's important to stay at the table so that their voice can be heard when it comes back up.
Amen. Yeah. I will say for me, this has been such a grief. There's so much grief for me in this. And my spiritual discipline, look at this. It's your fault. What I've experienced is a spiritual discipline of just hope making, and that hope being based really on no fact at all, and just how much I just need that. I just need to hope. So that's been my spiritual practice since this has started, and that's been the only kind of levitating, sustaining thing I can do. And I'm a very practical dude, so for me to hope on something that has no basis in evidence is really hard for me. But it's been kind of opening spiritually for me. So I invite you to hope senselessly and foolishly. Yes.
I see why we would want the one church plan to be picked over the traditional plan. Is there, for you personally, why not the connectional plan to be picked?
So for me, the connectional plan, my issues with it is it takes 6 years to operationalize. So, the General Conference votes in 2019, annual conferences have to approve the constitutional amendment in 2020, and then the jurisdictions choose which connection they're in 2021, and then the annual conference in 2022 decides if they're going to go with the same one as the jurisdiction, and then local churches in 2023 decide if they're going to go with the one for annual conference, and then in 2024 and 2025, somebody meets to create these connectional conferences. So for me, it just feels like 6 years of nothing but this. And at the end, you're going to get a very expensive infrastructure, right? I think the infrastructure is already pretty expensive for local churches, and if you triple it, I don't think it's sustainable.
I think one church plan is also a cost-effective way of us getting back together after the death tsunami sweeps the generation out that's been the sort of the roadblock
Again, I invite you to foolish hope.
Outrageous hope.
Outrageous hope. All right, so pick a plan day, and then legislative section day. So what happens at legislative section day is usually there's committees that go into the parliamentary process and deal with each petition. There's a committee of the whole, so it's going to be the whole annual conference as one legislative committee. We have to elect a chair, which will be a lay person or clergy person, but not a bishop. We have to vote on all 99 petitions. There has to be a vote on all 99 petitions in legislative section day. And the goal there is to come out with one church plan as recommended yes, 51% vote, and everything else either tabled indefinitely or voted down. That's day 2, second bite at the apple. And then the last day is plenary day. So in a typical general conference, there's committees of 100 people, and they recommend to the whole group of 864 people what action to take. In this general conference, the committee is the whole thing. So yes, we're going to vote on the final day on the same things we voted on the day before. So that will be interesting, right? That's where we're going to need a very tight network. In Congress there's these whips, right, where you can talk on the floor and say, we need this vote, we need that vote. So we need good whips to manage the floor activity. Now, can you pause that? Because I'm going to go candor for a second on process here.
They may just walk out, so there's that piece. Or we may have a combination. I just don't understand practically how this is going to work. I've been to it there myself a couple of times, so, what if we have a kind of process where you don't have a clear majority in which plan goes forward? So I'm thinking partly about that. But is what you're saying that at the plenary, what I'm hearing you say is all 3 plans, both or else would come up for a vote. They have to be voted on, or are you saying we can leave the others behind after the pick a day?
As I understand the process, and I hope to learn more this week, pick a plan day is going to say, I don't know that it has to be a majority vote. Pick a plan day is which plan do you want to perfect, right? So it won't there won't be an opportunity to amend it or change it. Yeah. It's just which concept is the most interesting. And then on the legislative section day, again, my understanding is that's the first one we're going to work on. And in legislation day, somebody says, I want to amend it here, I want to add this sentence, I want to subtract that sentence. We vote on each amendment, we can vote on the plan. And if it gets to 50%, right, if the modified, amended one church plan gets to 50% as the first action on the legislative section day, then I think the body's not going to want to pass things that conflict with it, right? There's no way to just dismiss it all. Right. There has to be an action, but you kind of hope for some kind of sanity in the group that says, well, if we pass the dissolution plan, it counteracts what we just did. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
right?
I understand. Okay.
So it's pick a plan day is which concept do we want to develop, and legislation section day is which one do we want to perfect.
Is there anything that would extend this conference beyond 3 days?
I know it's worst case, but I mean, what would?
I don't know.
Okay. I mean, because
Rapture?
I mean, if nothing's decided, if it's an as-is thing, I mean, that's in my mind, it's unsustainable anyways. So I mean, it's asinine for everyone to get up and leave after 3 days and nothing. We'll just continue how the book of discipline is. So.
Well, and what you're pointing out is the strategy of the minority folks, right? If somebody doesn't like their plan not getting it, then the easy strategy is delay, refer, table, blah, 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 and try to prevent a decision from being made. And then status quo wins, right? So that's something to anticipate, is this kind of legislative trickery, right? And undermining But I'm with you. I don't think, I think if we end up with status quo, the institution loses credibility, right? It's just, I think after all of this, I think after all of this special session, $4 million, commission, bishops, everybody's attention, I think the whole church is like, just do it. I think the status quo, that I think people lose faith that General Conference can do anything. I mean, particularly after the 2012 drama, where whatever got passed, and then the Judicial Council knocked it out on the last day, and we've done nothing right now. So I think the institution needs action. That would be my argument. But I want inclusion, so I don't want status quo. That's also my issue. Okay.
Oh. Knowing there will be some saying the one church plan doesn't go far enough.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about, from my understanding, I see it as a step forward
Okay.
in the way that could be further. But just curious if that's a part of the conversation as you're talking with folks who say it doesn't go far enough.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely groups who don't like one church. And there are things in one church that can offend, right? I mean, there's a language that says we affirm those views as biblically coherent if they are, traditional views of marriage, right? I mean, I think for some folks that doesn't need to be said, right? There's a simple plan out there that says just drop the language and don't say any of these kind of protection stuff for traditionalists. So, yeah, I think there's a section on the left. I don't think you can presume that the left is on board with one church plan. I don't think everyone, right? And I could support both. For me personally, I could support one church and I can support simple. I don't have to choose. I can do both of them. But yeah, I think there is some softness over there. I think for me, I do grow with the theological diversity. I want a church with some traditionalists and some progressives. That helps me in my pursuit of faith. So I'm pretty sincere one church guy in the sense of I think there's value in being in a world in which everybody's trying to rush to the polls. There's crazy value in being in a relationship that is a little more diverse, and I personally value that and have grown from that. So I'm okay with some diversity within the church, but I want freedom of conscience. I want gay people to not be oppressed. Yeah. All right, let me wrap up because there's hunger in the room, no doubt. What you can do. I beg you, please, if you can, speak. For God's sakes, it's your church, and it's the church you want. And speak into this moment. People will listen to you more than you think. There's a conference, Northwest Texas Conference, not a single ordination last year. They worry about the future of their church, and they want young clergy. And for young clergy to say, this is the church we need you to be, has more power than you believe. I'm telling you, people are deeply desirous to hear your voice. And I really hope if you can do it as some kind of official something, right? And I don't care what it is. It could be one church. It could be beyond one church. It could be whatever it is. Just speak into this moment and say, this is the church who we need to be, who I want to serve, who I want to sign up to. Please do that. Please ask other seminaries to do that, right? There's this idea that in January, we're going to start rolling out a series of announcements. So, if I could ask anything, if the student body somehow did something dramatic, a statement, a video, affirmation, circus, I don't care, some attention thing that says, here's the church we need to be by God, and do it in January, and get other seminaries to do something similar. it could tip the balance. We are literally going vote by vote. This thing is 20 votes away. You know, it is 20 or 30 votes away from happening. And really, every vote's going to matter. So if you could think about some kind of way to speak to the church in this moment, please, please, please do it. Make it your statement, your voice, your style, your character. Third bullet, please do this. Okay. Contact delegates from your conference. I can tell you who we think is undecided in your conference. If you want to come up afterwards, I can tell you which delegates are most pivotal in this debate, and you can call them or write them or email them. Delegates want to be confident that what they're doing is not going to damage the church, right? They want to be confident that wherever it moves is not harmful. And the more voices who say, we're ready for this, we want this, we can handle this, the more confident they'll be in that effort. So talking to delegates, getting other people to talk to delegates, getting alumni to talk to delegates, please, alumni, call your delegates, even if it's people you know. Call them, reassure them, encourage them. And if you're really good, you can figure out, if it's a delegate you don't know well, but you know someone they know and respect, talk to that person. So if there's a seminary professor who knows a delegate, get that professor to talk to the delegate. You know, basically build around each delegate a community of support such that they can take a step towards inclusion at long last, would be what I'd ask. All right, that's what I got.